The first thing I noticed wasn't the silence. It was the missed call. No voicemail. Just Noah's name on my screen, time-stamped 2:14 a.m., sitting there like an unfinished sentence. I stared at it longer than I should have, thumb hovering, waiting for the phone to do something on its own. It didn't. Phones never do. I locked the screen and told myself it was nothing. Noah and I had always been bad at timing. That was kind of our thing. Missed calls, unread messages, conversations that almost happened and then didn't. We joked about it once, years ago, back when joking was easier. I met Noah 2 summers earlier, at a friend's rooftop birthday. One of those half-drunk, half-intimate city nights where everyone feels closer than they actually are. He'd handed me a beer without asking what I wanted, like he already knew. We talked about nothing important. Music, bad landlords, how neither of us really believed we'd stay in this city forever. What we never talked about was the way he stayed beside me all night, or how, when I left, I felt like I was stepping out of something unfinished. Our relationship, if you could even call it that, was built entirely out of pauses. He'd type something and delete it. I'd start a reply and think better of it. Once, he sent me a photo of his kitchen table, sunlight spilling across an empty mug, no caption. I stared at it for 10 minutes, then put my phone face down like it had accused me of something. We never asked direct questions. Never said, "What are we doing?" Because asking meant risking an answer. The night of the missed call, I was sitting on my bed, fully dressed, shoes still on, like I was waiting to be told where to go. Outside, the city hummed, cars, voices, someone laughing too loud down the block. Life continuing without permission. I opened our message thread. The last thing I'd sent was 3 days earlier. "You around this week?" No response, not even a read receipt. I typed, hoke cars, and erased it. Typed everything okay? And erased that too. Each unsent message felt heavier than the last, like stacking bricks I refused to place. The truth was, I knew why he'd called, or at least I knew the shape of it. Noah was good at holding things in until they pressed against the inside of his ribs. I'd seen it in the way he went quiet mid-conversation, eyes unfocused, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. Once, after too many drinks, he'd almost said something. I remember the exact moment we were leaning against his car, shoulder to shoulder. He opened his mouth, closed it, then said, "You should get home." I nodded, like that was normal, like I didn't feel the loss of a sentence that never existed. The missed call sat between us now, invisible but solid. I imagined him staring at his phone after it rang out, wondering if he should try again, wondering if silence was already an answer. I didn't call back. Not that night. I told myself it was too late, that he was probably asleep. That morning would be better. Morning always felt like a promise, even when it wasn't. The next day, I woke to nothing. No new notifications. No follow-up message explaining the call away. Just quiet. I went through my routine on autopilot. Coffee, shower, emails, carrying that quiet with me like a second skin. Every few minutes I checked my phone, half expecting him to disappear entirely, like the call had been a glitch. By evening, the urge to reach out had dulled into something heavier. Not urgency, not fear, just the slow realization that some things don't fade loudly. They fade because no one names them. I sat by the window as the sky went soft and gray, phone resting face up on the table. I thought about how many times we'd stood this close to saying something real. How we'd mistaken restraint for patience, silence for safety. The phone stayed still. And for the first time, I wondered if the story between us wasn't happening in what we'd shared, but in everything we'd left unsaid. 2 days later, Noah's name showed up again. Not as a call this time, just a message. Sorry I disappeared. I wasn't sure how to follow up. I read it while standing in line for coffee, the kind of place where everyone pretends not to listen to each other. My chest tightened in a way that felt familiar, almost practiced. Of course he wasn't sure. Neither of us ever was. I typed "Kainemas, it's okay," and stopped. Deleted it. Typed, "You don't owe me anything." Deleted that too. What I finally sent was smaller, safer. Pengzer, I get it. The dots appeared. Vanished. Appeared again. I imagined him somewhere quiet, phone in hand, deciding which version of himself was allowed to speak. Do you want to come over? He wrote. We don't have to talk about anything. That last part did most of the damage. We were experts at not talking about anything. Still, I said yes, maybe because I was tired of being brave in silence. Noah's apartment smelled like clean laundry and something burnt. Toast, probably. He opened the door with a half smile that didn't quite land. We stood there for a beat too long, like we were waiting for a cue that never came. Inside, nothing had changed. Same couch with the sagging armrest. Same plant by the window he forgot to water. The normalcy made everything else louder. We sat, we talked about neutral things. Work. A movie neither of us had finished. The city. Every sentence carefully shaped to avoid edges. At one point, he reached for his phone, then thought better of it, and set it face down on the table. The gesture felt heavier than words. I called you that night, he said finally, staring at the floor. And then I panicked. I nodded. I saw. I didn't expect you to answer, he admitted. I think I just needed to know I could try. That landed somewhere deep and quiet inside me. Not relief, not hurt, recognition. I wanted to tell him how many times I'd done the same thing. Hovered, hesitated, retreated. Instead, I said nothing. I let the silence stretch. Not empty this time, just unfilled. Later, when it got dark, we stood by the window without planning to. City lights blinked on below us, distant and indifferent. Our shoulders almost touched. Almost. I'm bad at this, Noah said softly, at saying things when they matter. I know, I replied. So am I. He laughed under his breath, like that was both a confession and a relief. For a moment, it felt like we might finally say the thing we'd been circling for years. Not a grand declaration, just something honest and plain. But the moment passed, or maybe we let it. When I left, there was no hug, no promise to text. Just a look that held too much and not enough all at once. Walking home, I realized something that surprised me with its calm. Maybe the story between us wasn't waiting for a big confession. Maybe it was always going to live in these near misses, these almosts. In the courage it took to keep showing up, even without guarantees. That night, my phone stayed quiet again, and for the first time, I didn't feel like the silence was closing in. It felt like space. A week passed without contact. Not dramatically, not painfully, just quietly, like a room you stop using and forget to turn the lights back on. I noticed the absence in small ways. When my phone buzzed and it wasn't him, when I caught myself framing thoughts like messages I'd never send. Then, one afternoon, I opened a drawer looking for a charger and found a receipt from a bar we'd been to together months earlier. I didn't remember keeping it. I didn't remember deciding it mattered. But there it was, folded twice, softened at the edges, proof that at some point I'd thought, Common, don't lose this. I sat on the floor longer than necessary, receipt in my hand, thinking about how many things like that existed between us. Not memories we talked about, just artifacts. Evidence of feeling without narration. That night, Noah liked one of my photos. No comment, no follow-up, just the quiet acknowledgement that he still knew where I was. We ran into each other by accident a few days later. Or maybe not by accident. It was the grocery store near his place. Late evening, fluorescent lights flattening everything. I saw him at the end of an aisle, comparing pasta sauces like it was a life decision. For a second, I considered turning around, letting the moment stay hypothetical. But then he looked up. Oh, he said. Not surprised, just present. Hey, I replied. We stood there with our baskets, surrounded by strangers, choosing produce, living uncomplicated lives. He looked tired. Not in a dramatic way, in the way people do when they've been thinking instead of sleeping. We didn't talk about the gap, or the call, or the almost stacked neatly between us, we talked about sauce, about how he always bought too much food for one person, about nothing that could hurt. At the register, he hesitated. "Do you want to walk for a minute?" he asked. No pressure. Outside, the air was cool, forgiving. We walked without a destination, steps falling into an easy rhythm. At one point, he brushed my hand and didn't pull away. Neither did I. It felt like a sentence we were both willing to leave unfinished. We stopped on a quiet block, streetlights humming softly overhead. Noah looked like he was going to say something. Then he smiled, small and honest. "I'm glad we're still here," he said. "So am I." That was it. No definition, no promise, just acknowledgement. When we parted, there was a pause, not awkward, not tense, just a shared understanding that whatever this was, it moved at the speed of our courage and our fear. Walking home, I realized something that settled gently instead of stinging. Not every story needs a confession to be real. Some are written entirely in restraint, in the things we protect by not naming too soon. My phone stayed in my pocket, so did his number. And for once, the unsaid didn't feel like a loss. It felt like trust. After the walk, something shifted. Not forward, not back, just slightly to the side. Like we'd both stepped out of the path we thought we were on and found another one running parallel. We started sharing space again. Not deliberately, just small overlaps. He'd reply to a story I posted with a single word. I'd send him a photo of something ordinary, the sky from my window, a dog that looked like it had seen things. No commentary, no questions, just proof of presence. One night, close to midnight, I typed "you up" and didn't delete it. I stared at the screen, waiting for regret to kick in. It didn't. Instead, the dots appeared almost immediately. Yeah, that was it. No follow-up, no explanation. I imagined him sitting somewhere quiet, phone in hand, just as still as I was. Two people awake for reasons neither wanted to spell out. We didn't meet that night. We didn't even suggest it. The conversation drifted from music to sleep habits, to the strange comfort of knowing someone else was conscious in the same city. When I finally put my phone down, it felt like setting something fragile on a shelf instead of dropping it. A few days later, he invited me over again. No disclaimer this time. No drive, we don't have to talk. Just an address and a time. We cooked together, shoulders bumping, hands passing plates back and forth like it was muscle memory. At one point, he reached for the same knife I did, our fingers brushing. He didn't pull away. Neither did I. It wasn't dramatic, just warm. Familiar in a way that surprised me. After dinner, we sat on the floor with our backs against the couch. Music played quietly, something instrumental neither of us had chosen. The room felt settled, like it had exhaled. "There's stuff I almost say to you," Noah admitted, eyes fixed on nothing. "All the time," I nodded. "Me too." We didn't list them, didn't compare notes. Saying almost was enough. It acknowledged the weight without forcing it into shape. When I left, he walked me to the door. We stood there, closer than before. Close enough that I could feel the heat of him, the question hovering between us. He didn't kiss me. Instead, he rested his forehead briefly against mine. Just a second. Just enough. Walking home, I understood something with unexpected clarity. We weren't stuck. We were choosing. Choosing slowness, choosing care, choosing to let meaning accumulate without rushing it into a label. Back in my apartment, I didn't check my phone right away. I sat by the window, city breathing below, and let the moment finish settling. When I finally looked, there was a message from him, time-stamped minutes earlier. "I'm glad you came." I typed "snoo Ims too" and sent it without hesitation. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of trust, of intention, of things still growing quietly between us, and for the first time, I didn't feel like the story was happening somewhere else. It was right here, in the space we kept, and the words we still hadn't said. The first thing that changed was how aware I became of restraint, not in a dramatic, aching way, More like noticing the air pressure shift before a storm that never quite breaks. Noah started calling instead of texting. Short calls. 10 minutes maybe. Usually while one of us was walking somewhere. We talked about nothing that required memory. Nothing that needed defending later. I learned the sound of his breathing when he was thinking. He learned mine when I was about to change the subject. One night, he called and didn't speak right away. I could hear the city on his end. Traffic, a siren far off. I waited. Didn't rush him. I almost said something today, he finally murmured. I leaned against my kitchen counter, phone warm in my hand. Yeah? Yeah. And then I didn't. I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. Me too. It felt strange how comforting that was. Not the withholding, but the honesty about it. A few evenings later, we ended up on his roof. No plan, just habit. The sky was low and hazy, city lights diffused into a soft blur. We sat side by side, knees drawn up, sharing a blanket he'd grabbed without comment. At some point, his arm rested behind me. Not touching, just there, a possibility without pressure. You ever think we're being ridiculous? He asked quietly, constantly. But you're still here. So are you. He nodded, accepting that as an answer. The blanket shifted slightly as the wind picked up. Without looking at me, he adjusted it so it covered my shoulder too. The gesture felt louder than any confession would have. For a moment, I wondered what would happen if I turned my head, if I closed the distance we'd been protecting so carefully. The thought didn't scare me, but it didn't feel right yet either. So I stayed still, and he did too. Later, when we were saying goodbye at the stairwell door, there was another pause, longer this time. His hand hovered near my arm, then settled there, light, grounding. I'm not avoiding this, he said softly. I'm just trying to do it right. I nodded. I know. He leaned in, not to kiss me, but close enough that our foreheads nearly touched again. We stayed like that for a breath. 2. Then he stepped back. Walking home, I realized something that felt both simple and enormous. This story wasn't stalled. It was deepening. Quietly. Intentionally. Somewhere between the calls we let ring once before answering. The words we admitted we almost said. And the touches that stopped just short. We were building something that didn't need proof yet. That night, my phone buzzed once. You okay? I answered without thinking. Piecing a biz. Yeah. I am. And as I set the phone down, I felt it clearly. Not anticipation this time. Not longing, but steadiness. Like standing in the middle of a sentence and knowing, without doubt, that it would eventually be finished. The almost started to change shape, not into words, still not that, but into consistency. Noah began showing up in ways that didn't ask for interpretation. He remembered things I'd mentioned once and never repeated. He sent me articles without context, trusting I'd understand why. When he asked how my day was, he waited for the real answer. One afternoon, I had a meeting that went worse than expected. Nothing catastrophic. Just enough to leave a dull ache behind my ribs. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't post about it. I just walked longer than I needed to on my way home, letting the city wear me down. When I unlocked my apartment, my phone buzzed. I don't know why, Noah had written, but I had a feeling today might be heavy for you. I sat on the floor with my back against the door, phone in my hand, stunned by the accuracy of it, not because he'd fixed anything, but because he'd noticed without being told. I typed next thing, yeah, it kind of is, and stopped there. That was enough. He didn't ask for details. He didn't push. He just stayed. We met later that week at a small gallery opening. White walls, quiet murmurs, too much wine. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't supposed to be. But we moved through the space together like we were already a unit, pausing at the same pieces, drifting back to each other without effort. At one point, I caught him watching me instead of the art. Not intensely, just attentively, like he was taking inventory of something familiar. "What?" I asked. "Nothing," he said. "Just, you look settled." I thought about that word for a long time. Outside, waiting for our separate rides, he reached for my hand. Fully this time. No hovering, no testing, just contact. I didn't squeeze, neither did he. We stood there, hands linked, letting the traffic rush past us like it had nothing to do with our lives. When my ride came, we let go easily. No rush, no reluctance. Like we trusted there would be another time. That night, lying in bed, I thought about how quiet everything felt. Not empty quiet, but resolved. Like a question that no longer needed asking. We still hadn't said the big things. We still hadn't defined anything out loud, but I understood now that what we were doing wasn't avoidance, it was alignment. Two people learning the exact pressure it took to hold something without breaking it. Before I fell asleep, I sent him one message. "Thank you for today," he replied a few minutes later. "None's anytime. I'm here." I set my phone down and stared at the ceiling, letting that sentence echo. Not as a promise, not as a declaration, but as a fact. And in that moment, I knew. The story wasn't building toward a confession, it was building toward something steadier. Something chosen. Something said, finally, through everything we no longer needed to say. The night it finally happened, it didn't announce itself. No dramatic buildup, no sudden courage. Just a quiet inevitability, like something reaching its natural end, because there was nowhere else left to go. Noah came over on a Sunday. The kind of evening that feels borrowed. Early dark, soft rain, nowhere urgent to be. We cooked without music, moving around each other easily, like the space between us had learned our shapes. At one point, he rinsed his hands at the sink and stayed there longer than necessary, staring out the window. "I almost didn't come," he said, not turning around. "Why?" I asked. I was afraid that if I did, I wouldn't be able to keep pretending I didn't want more. He finally looked at me then. Not searching, not guarded, just open in a way that made my chest tighten. I didn't answer right away. I walked over, stood beside him. Our shoulders touched. Fully this time. No hesitation. No retreat. "I don't want to pretend anymore either," I said. What followed wasn't a kiss. Not yet. It was him resting his head against my shoulder, weight settling in like it belonged there. My hand came up automatically, fingers threading into his hair without asking permission. He exhaled, long, steady, like he'd been holding something in for years and finally let it go. "I kept thinking," he said quietly, "that if I named it, I'd ruin it." I was scared of the same thing. We stood there, rain tapping against the glass, the city blurred and distant, and then, slowly, carefully, he lifted his head. Our foreheads touched first, familiar and grounding. When he kissed me, it was unhurried. Soft. Not an arrival, but a continuation. It felt less like crossing a line, and more like stepping into alignment with something that had already been true. We didn't say, "I love you." We didn't need to. The kiss carried everything we'd practiced saying with silence. Later, much later, we lay side by side on the couch, legs tangled loosely, the room lit only by the street lamp outside. Noah traced absent patterns on my arm, not thinking about it, just present. "I'm glad we took our time," he murmured. "Me too." Because now I understood what the story had been teaching me all along. Love doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it's built in restraint, in patience, in the trust that if something is real, it won't disappear just because you let it breathe. What we had wasn't born in a confession. It was shaped by missed calls that still mattered. Messages we didn't send, because we wanted to protect the fragile thing forming underneath. By all the moments we chose care over certainty. As the room settled around us, I realized something simple and grounding. Nothing between us felt unfinished anymore. Not because everything had been said, but because, finally, nothing important needed to be.